We are honored and thankful to be here today to talk about the Dane Rempfer Scholarship Fund and to tell our Encompass story. After debating 12 years whether or not to have kids, we were in our 30s before taking the plunge. Dane was born in October 1983 after a long, difficult delivery. He arrived robust and feisty. Walking early, he was nonstop energy, and he was a difficult toddler, throwing tantrums at the drop of a hat. As new and inexperienced parents, we thought this was normal.
When we had our second baby, Kate, 22 months after Dane, we thought something was wrong with her. She was calmer, less fussy, and so much easier to care for. Thank you, Kate.
Dane had his first ear infection at 3 months, and they were relentless until he was 3, when our pediatrician recommended tubes in his ears. On the day of the procedure, we canceled and requested allergy tests. Turns out he was allergic to wheat, soy, and peanuts, causing the fluid in his ears. His formula had been soy-based, and a peanut butter sandwich was a regular lunch.
He threw tantrums out of frustration because he wasn't able to communicate what he wanted. Language was difficult.
Fortunately, we heard that Children's Services of Snow Valley, later rebranded as Encompass, screened birth to 3 age kids for developmental evaluation. He was tested, and there definitely was a speech delay, qualifying him for therapy. Clearly, not hearing was linked to his chronic ear infections.
With Encompass's speech therapy, Dane found the help he needed, and we found the support we needed, especially at a time when I was starting my own business and Charlotte was working full-time.
We became dedicated Encompass supporters, serving on the board and helping with the capital campaign for the first education center. Encompass was an important part of our family, and Dane continued to thrive because we had learned to be his advocates. So who was this kid called Dane? Everyone who knew or had ever met him had a story. From the time he was a toddler, a kindergartner, a grade schooler, a middle schooler, and finally a freshman at Mount Si, he had many friendships throughout the valley. Like his dad, he was a natural athlete, playing soccer, baseball, basketball through primary and elementary school and middle school, and Jerry coached many of his teams. Dane also coached a beginner soccer team with a friend one season.
A farmer who Dane worked for mentioned that Dane had a natural way with animals. I wasn't sure what he meant until a dog showed up at the school bus turnaround one day. A pug, in poor health, very stinky, growling and snapping if anyone got close, except for Dane. They had a boy-dog talk, and Dane informed me that it had been abandoned and needed rescue. No way was that stinky dog coming to our house. Using a little adult persuasion, I got Dane and Kate into the car and home. Before I could change clothes and get back outside, Dane had recruited Charlotte for the rescue. With no response to the lost dog signs, the stinky dog living quarters moved inside, mostly Dane's room, and he now had a name, Charlie. I announced my ultimatum at the family meeting. If Charlie stays, then I move out. After some thinking, Dane's response was, "Dad, you need to give us the address so we can visit you." Eventually, I prevailed, and we put out word for dog adoption. Things got a little awkward when Dane interviewed and rejected the first set of adopters. Finally, a mother-daughter won his approval, and Charlie found a home.
When Dane struggled with reading and writing in elementary school, he was diagnosed with dyslexia and attention deficit disorder, a daunting combination. As a 5th grader, he enrolled in Hamlin Robinson, a school whose curriculum is based on a multisensory approach to learning language. Leaving behind friends, he had known since kindergarten. And he chose to stay another year when his Valley classmates were moving into middle school. Being with kids who had a variety of learning abilities contributed to his ability to empathize with others. When Dane's middle school principal told me that he had been in his office, I was not surprised that he was there to relay a concern for a friend who he thought had an eating disorder. Jerry also remembers him tearing up when he witnessed a person experiencing homelessness. Dane's friend Pete said, "If I were to describe Dane in a single word, it would be kind." That might not be the first word that comes to mind for most teenage boys, but thinking back to my memories of Dane, he seemed driven by kindness. Dane was extremely well-liked and popular with his peers, but ensuring his own social status didn't drive him at all. He was nice to everyone and would help anyone.
The trend at Snoqualmie Middle School was for friends to place their heavy backpacks together in a pile and then hang with that group. Garrett had just moved into the valley and looked much younger than most 8th graders. Not yet having any friends, he kept his pack on, feeling rather awkward and dreading the new school experience. That changed when a tall kid grabbed his backpack and placed it in his pile and asked him to join his group. Garrett wanted me to know that when Dane befriended him, everything changed and school was something he looked forward to.
At 13 and 15, like many tween siblings, Dane and Kate were moving into the peer phase of their relationship. Arguments with a remote control and using the bathroom were sprinkled with conversation about trying to gracefully navigate adolescence. Kate remembers his tips about how to fit in at middle school. Dane reminded her that even though she was pretty good at soccer and her teammates would help her make new friends, she should meet many types of people, advice she has followed to this day.
Get her done.
Okay. Dane was just coming into his own as a freshman at Mount Si when in November 1998, having turned 15 in October, he was killed by a hit-and-run driver while walking with his friends on their way to a sleepover. News of his death ricocheted throughout the valley. Everyone who had known or met Dane was affected by his death. It is said that the death of a child is the worst possible nightmare a parent can experience. It is true. Our lives were shattered. One never fully recovers or gets over it. We could only somehow learn to live with Dane's death, which has been made possible by the love and support of family and friends throughout this community. The generosity of our community would ultimately help us survive the tragedy and be a reminder of the remarkable impact of his one short life.
When Dane was killed by a hit-and-run driver, and after what we thought was a light sentence for leaving the scene of an accident, we realized there was a huge loophole in the law that allowed impaired drivers to avoid appropriate penalties. In Dane's honor, we wanted to correct this obvious oversight. With the help of friends, we worked with the Washington state legislators to draft a law that moved hit-and-run death from a Class C to a Class B felony, doubling the maximum penalty. The Dane Rempfer Bill, Senate Bill 6071, was introduced in the 1999 legislative session and was passed and signed into law by Governor Locke in 2000. Dane's grandfather, Charlotte's father, delivered Dane's bill to his state representative, and the new law was passed in North Dakota.
We also had thousands of dollars of memorials given in Dane's name. Of course, no amount of money could bring him back, but we realized we could keep his memory alive by establishing a scholarship fund. With the help of a dear friend, Nancy Hayes, who set up a nonprofit 501c3, the Dane Rempfer Scholarship was established for Mount Si High School seniors. After a few years, the scholarship didn't seem as relevant because most students applying wouldn't know his story. It made sense to transfer the funds to Encompass because Dane benefited from its services. Since 2015, scholarships have been given to families who need the extra financial support for their toddlers to attend preschool. When we were asked to speak about Dane's fund, we were especially excited to learn about a couple of kiddos who have received scholarships. And now it's time to hear their inspiring stories. Thank you, community. Thank you, Stacy and Melissa, for sharing these wonderful stories. And yes, Stacy, Dane did keep everyone on their toes. Knowing how helpful Encompass Preschool has been for Sayla's and Victoria's growth and development reminds us that Dane's Scholarship Fund has made a difference in the lives of many Valley families. Dane's rocks in both Encompass playgrounds are reminders that memories of Dane will always live on in our stories.
We have been amazed at the growth of Encompass over the years. What has brought us fulfillment has been watching the organization become a cornerstone throughout the Valley for pediatric therapy, early childhood education, and parent support.
Now is the time to give generously to Encompass so that Encompass can continue the good work of helping Valley children and their families thrive. A deep, heartfelt thank you for supporting this incredible organization.